I will briefly look at the notion of irony, which is a way of getting this point, which is a simple way, maybe a simple way of getting this point. Namely, what is irony? You have a classical definition which goes back to Quintilian. Quintilian, the great rhetorician of antiquity, and he says in Latin, "Contrarium ei quod dicitur intelligendum est." It's a very 6 words, but go very far. The contrary of what is said is to be understood. What is irony? You have a certain sentence, but you have to understand the contrary of what is said. And now what is important in this definition is that the sentence stays the same. The sentence stays the same. Okay, you have some primitive example of irony. It's pouring rain and somebody says, "What a wonderful weather we're having." In analytical philosophy, this is treated as the major example of irony. Okay, it's the most primitive example of irony. But what is the point? That in irony, the same words can mean the opposite of what they mean. There is no linguistic marker. There are no instructions for use. If you give instructions for use, then it's bad irony. No? If you say, "I meant this ironically," okay, this is lost. The irony is lost. You cannot say this. So you just use the same sentence, and it's up to the listener to decide whether this was meant at the straight value, at the face value, or in the opposite sense. And how can the listener decide? I mean, there's no marker. There's no marker. It only depends not on anything that is present in the sentence. It depends on the subject of enunciation. How is the subject of enunciation placed in relation to this sentence? And this is why this is why I think this Quintilian's definition goes very far, because it by simplest means it shows the treachery of human speech. You use the same words, but you never know whether this was meant seriously at the face value, or whether the words mean what they are supposed to mean, or it means the opposite, the negation of it. So the same element is used as A and non-A. You say, what do you do if you use irony? You say A and non-A at the same time, in one. And this is why I'm using this, because Hegel is actually using this at some point. He speaks about a Socratic irony, and he says, well, what is great with Socrates, well, okay, it's a longer passage in the history of philosophy, I won't comment on this, but the passage ends with this. He says, dialectics, die allgemeine Ironie der Welt. Dialectics, the universal irony of the world. And I find this very beautiful, because irony is supposed to be a rhetorical stratagem, a rhetorical figure. A paradoxical rhetorical figure, because there is no... the sentence stays the same. If you say rhetorical figure, then you usually add something, to embellish or to amplify the sentence or whatever. This is what rhetoric is. You try to persuade by adding various things. But in irony, you don't add anything. The sentence stays completely the same. No? So it's a rhetorical figure, but which for Hegel actually it doesn't pertain merely to discourse, to rhetorics, to language. It pertains to the things that the language refers to. So it's not simply the language which is ironic, it's the world which is ironic. The language is part of the world which is ironic. So you can see there the allgemeine Ironie der Welt, the universal irony of the world. This is what dialectics is, that anything can be what it seems to be or the opposite at the very same time. Everything actually says A and non-A at the same time. So there is the embodiment of contradiction. There's embodiment of contradiction in irony. And this is why I think this is a useful way of seeing this Hegel strategy of the best way to fight X is X itself. means precisely irony is the distance between x and x. But x stays the same. It's the same x. And when Hegel was defending his PhD in August 1801, he had to write 10 theses where they would be debating in Latin. And the first of these theses, I always found this completely incredible. The first one of the theses in Latin is Contradictio est regula veri, non-contradictio falsi. The contradiction is the sign of truth, non-contradiction of the false. So like a young man took on the whole Aristotelian tradition, which was based on the principle of non-contradiction. This is the basic asset, the basic presupposition of the whole logical tradition. The thing cannot be true if it contradicts itself. And he sort of posited with the first thesis on a PhD defense that only things that contradict, only the contradiction can be the realm of truth. Only if things contradict each other. This is the index of truth. This is what we should follow. There is always A and non-A at the same time.